What kind of husband files a lawsuit against his own wife for a joke? I only meant it as a prank, something to get his attention. But now I'm sitting in a courtroom watching him describe, in perfect calm detail, how my joke destroyed our marriage and his reputation. I used to think Daniel needed loosening up. He was the kind of man who took life too seriously, steady, polite, almost painfully decent. He planned his weeks like puzzles, every task slotted neatly into its place. People said I was lucky to have him. Maybe I was, but lucky isn't the same as happy. He didn't laugh much, and when he did, it was small and quiet, like he was afraid to take up space. I loved him once, or I thought I did, but somewhere along the way, I started wanting to see if I could make him flinch. His best friend, Aaron Cole, was the opposite. Confident, talkative, funny. The kind of man who filled every room. They had grown up together, gone through school, weddings, everything side by side. I liked Aaron. Everyone did. But I also liked the way Daniel tensed around him. Maybe that's why I teased him. Maybe I wanted to prove I still had power in a marriage that had gone dull. When I told Daniel one night that I could probably cheat with Aaron if I wanted to, it was supposed to be a joke. We were sitting on the couch, the television humming in the background. He looked at me, surprised but calm, and said he didn't think that was funny. I rolled my eyes and told him he needed a better sense of humor. To me, it was harmless, a way to get a reaction. But the look he gave me wasn't anger. It was distance. My sister Talia thought I was hilarious. She said I was finally showing Daniel what it felt like to be the one losing control. She told me men like him only respect boundaries when they're pushed. My friends agreed. They said I was too smart, too alive, to be married to someone so quiet. I believed them because it made me feel clever, not cruel. But Daniel wasn't stupid. He stopped trying to argue, stopped asking questions. He just watched, silent and steady, while I kept turning our marriage into a performance. I thought his silence meant weakness. I didn't realize it was strategy. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. It started as one of those harmless dinner parties. We had invited a few close friends, Aaron, of course, and his girlfriend Lily, along with my sister Talia and her new boyfriend. Daniel had grilled steaks, set the table, and even lit candles. Everything looked perfect, too perfect, like the kind of scene you'd find on a greeting card. I remember thinking it needed something unpredictable, something to make it less dull. That's always been my problem. I can't stand when life feels too smooth. Everyone was talking about relationships, about honesty and communication, all that usual nonsense. Talia said something like, "The best marriages are the ones where you can tell each other anything." I laughed and said, "Oh, really? So if I told Daniel I wanted to cheat with Aaron, that would make us stronger?" The table went quiet for a second before people started laughing awkwardly. Talia nearly spat out her drink. Aaron looked shocked at first, then smiled the way people do when they're not sure if they're part of the joke. Daniel froze. He looked straight at me, calm but cold, and asked, "Why would you say something like that?" I shrugged, pretending innocence. "It's a joke, Daniel. Relax. Everyone knows I'm kidding." But his face didn't change. He just nodded slowly and said, "If that's your kind of joke, maybe you should find a new audience." Talia broke the silence, laughing loudly to lighten the mood. "Come on, Daniel, it's just teasing. Don't be so uptight." The others joined in, relieved to have something to follow, but I saw his hands tighten around his fork before he set it down carefully. After dinner, I found him in the kitchen, rinsing dishes with mechanical focus. I tried to brush his arm playfully and said, "You're not still mad, are you?" He said quietly, "I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed you think humiliation is funny." I rolled my eyes and told him he was being dramatic. He said, "You embarrassed me in front of my best friend." I laughed and told him, If your ego's that fragile, maybe that's not my fault. He didn't reply. He just dried his hands and walked past me. That annoyed me more than if he'd shouted. I wanted a reaction, something loud and messy, proof that I could still affect him. Instead, he went upstairs, leaving me standing there with nothing but silence and a dirty plate. Later, when I told Talia about it, she thought it was hilarious. "You should have seen his face," she said. "He's too serious for his own good." I told her I was starting to think Daniel needed a lesson in humor. "He makes everything emotional," I said. "It was just a joke." The next few days, Daniel barely spoke to me. He still went through the motions, made coffee, packed lunches, fixed the squeaky cabinet, but he did it quietly. I tried to tease him back into conversation, told him he was acting like an old man, but nothing worked. That irritated me. I told myself he was sulking because I'd bruised his pride. When Aaron called to thank us for dinner, I answered before Daniel could. I made sure my tone was bright, casual, a little too warm. Aaron mentioned the joke, hesitantly, saying he hoped Daniel wasn't upset. I laughed and told him Daniel just didn't understand humor. "He'll be fine," I said. "He always is." Aaron chuckled, though it sounded nervous. That weekend, Daniel said he was going to help his mother with her garden. I asked if I could come, half out of guilt, half to prove I wasn't worried. He said it was fine, but his voice was distant. When we got there, his mother, Marianne, gave me a tight smile. She offered me tea, but her tone was clipped. After Daniel went outside, she said quietly, "He's a good man, Era. Some jokes cut deeper than you think." I pretended not to understand. "It was nothing," I said. "People are making too much of it." She looked at me like she wanted to say more but didn't. When Daniel came back inside, he avoided my eyes. That night, I tried to fix things the only way I knew how, pretending nothing was wrong. I cooked his favorite meal, lit a candle, even apologized halfway. "I didn't mean to upset you," I said. "I was just trying to make people laugh." He nodded but said nothing. I told him he was overreacting, that everyone else thought it was funny. He said quietly, "Everyone else doesn't have to live with you." I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying his expression at the dinner table, calm, measured, almost too calm. It wasn't embarrassment, it was something else, something heavier. I told myself he'd get over it. He always did. But when I came downstairs the next morning, his side of the closet was noticeably emptier. Not empty, just lighter. When he walked out the door that day, he didn't say goodbye. I told myself he was still angry. I didn't realize he was already preparing his next move. Over the next week, I convinced myself it had blown over. Daniel wasn't the type to hold grudges. He was quiet, steady, predictable. I'd seen him sulk before, but he always came around. This time felt different, but I told myself it was just his pride. He still made coffee, still went to work, still kissed my cheek out of habit. If anything, the silence worked in my favor. It made me feel powerful. At school, I told my co-workers the story. They laughed like I hoped they would. "You actually said that?" one of them gasped. "You're brave." I smiled modestly and said, "Someone has to make marriage interesting." The way they reacted made me feel justified, almost proud. By lunchtime, the story had turned into something else entirely. Apparently, I was the fearless wife who kept her man humble. That made me laugh. I didn't bother correcting them. Talia loved it too. She said my timing had been perfect. "You were testing him," she said. "If he can't handle a little joke, maybe he's not as secure as he pretends." I told her she was right. It felt good to be right. But Aaron wasn't laughing. When he called me that Friday, his tone was stiff. "I think that joke caused more trouble than you realize," he said. I told him Daniel would get over it. Aaron sighed and said, "It's not about him anymore. Lily's upset too." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, come on. I didn't mean it seriously." He said, "You might not have meant it, but people believe what they want to." That annoyed me. I told him he was overthinking, then hung up before he could lecture me further. That evening, Daniel came home early. He sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone while I cooked. I tried to draw him out, asking about work, about his mom, about Aaron. He gave one-word answers. Finally, I said, "You can stop pretending to be mad now. It's boring." He looked up slowly and said, "I'm not mad." "Then why are you acting like a stranger?" "I'm just watching," he said quietly. "Watching what?" He didn't answer. Something about his calmness made me uneasy. Later, while he showered, I peeked at his phone on the counter. He'd changed his passcode. That was new. I felt a flash of irritation, then fear. Why was he hiding things now? The next day, Aaron's name came up again. Talia had posted a photo of the dinner night with the caption, "Married women are dangerous when bored." I commented with a laughing emoji, thinking nothing of it. But people started tagging me in replies, joking about Team Aaron. I laughed along at first. It was harmless. People love drama. What I didn't expect was for Daniel to see it. He didn't mention it until Sunday evening. We were cleaning up after dinner when he said, "Do you enjoy making me look stupid?" I froze, pretending confusion. "What are you talking about?" He picked up his phone and turned the screen toward me. The post, the comments, everything. I tried to sound casual. "It's just online chatter, Daniel. Nobody takes that seriously." He said, "You do." I scoffed. "Oh, please, you're the one acting paranoid." He didn't reply. He just stared at me for a long moment, then said, "You've made your point." "What point?" I asked. "That you're not joking," he said, and walked out of the room. That line stayed in my head all night. Not joking. It bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I told Talia about it, hoping she'd agree he was overreacting. She laughed and said, "He's just embarrassed. Let him sulk." But when I got home the next day, something felt off. His wedding ring wasn't on the kitchen counter like usual. It was gone. His jacket wasn't hanging by the door. His laptop bag was missing. He came home late that night, quiet as always, but he didn't look at me when he sat down. "You're really going to keep this up?" I asked. He said, "You should be careful, Era. People remember what you say, especially when you make it public." It sounded like a warning, but I treated it like a challenge. "What's that supposed to mean?" He said, "It means the internet doesn't forget jokes." Then he got up and went to bed. The next morning, my coworker Sarah asked if Daniel was okay. She said someone had forwarded her a screenshot of the post, along with a rumor that Daniel's wife had admitted she wanted his best friend. I laughed it off, saying people online were dramatic. But as I walked back to class, my stomach twisted. That evening, Daniel didn't come home for dinner. No text, no call. I messaged him twice. He replied only once. Working late. I went to bed angry, telling myself he was trying to manipulate me with silence. I had no idea that, by that time, he'd already started collecting everything. Posts, screenshots, timestamps. Every single word I'd said was turning into evidence. The following week felt strangely calm. Daniel moved around the house like a shadow. Polite, quiet, distant. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't even sigh when I made small jabs at him. It was unnerving. I was used to having control, to being the one who dictated the tone of every room. Now he was just watching. I told myself he was sulking, but something in his eyes said otherwise. It wasn't anger, it was calculation. I tried to regain control the only way I knew, by performing. At school, I turned the situation into a story. My coworkers loved hearing about my husband, the humorless robot. I told them he was the kind of man who took jokes as betrayal. They laughed, which gave me that rush of validation I'd been missing. I even started posting small jabs online, quotes about fragile men and wives who refuse to apologize for being funny. It made me feel untouchable. When Talia came over that Friday, She said I was handling everything perfectly. "You're not backing down," she said. "That's strength." She scrolled through the comments on my post and laughed. "People are on your side. See, everyone knows it was just a joke." But not everyone agreed. That evening, Aaron showed up unexpectedly. Daniel wasn't home yet, and I could tell he didn't want to be there. He stood in the doorway, shifting from foot to foot. "Era, I think you should stop," he said. I pretended not to understand. "Stop what?" He sighed. "All of this. The posts, the gossip. Lily's furious and Daniel's embarrassed. You've made things worse than you think." I crossed my arms. "Why are you defending him?" "Because he's my friend," he said, "and because people are saying things now, about me, about you. It's not funny anymore." I told him everyone was too sensitive. That humor wasn't a crime. He shook his head. "You've humiliated him in front of everyone who matters to him. What did you expect him to do?" Before I could respond, the sound of the front door opening stopped us both. Daniel stepped inside, expression unreadable. His eyes went from Aaron to me, then back again. "Am I interrupting something?" he asked calmly. Aaron said he was just leaving. Daniel nodded slightly, but his eyes stayed on me. When the door closed behind Aaron, the silence was sharp. Daniel finally said, "Do you know what people at my office are saying about me?" I tried to sound amused. "Let me guess. Something about how I'm too funny for you." His voice didn't rise. "They think I'm pathetic." I shrugged. "That's not my fault. Maybe you should tell them not to believe gossip." He stepped closer, not angry, just steady. "They believe it because you made sure they would." That stopped me for a second. He held out his phone. On the screen were screenshots of my posts, my comments, even Talia's captions, all neatly saved. I frowned. "You're really collecting this stuff? That's obsessive," he said. "It's documentation." "Of what?" "The kind of person you've decided to become." I rolled my eyes. "You sound ridiculous." He nodded, slipped the phone back into his pocket and said, "Keep laughing, Era. It makes this easier." Then he went upstairs. That night I couldn't sleep. For the first time I felt something that wasn't pride. It was unease. Why was he saving everything? Why wasn't he reacting? I told myself it was just his way of winning arguments, silent punishment. Still, I noticed him taking photos of papers, setting up folders on his laptop, even scanning mail. The next morning, his mother called. She didn't even bother pretending to be polite. "You've turned his name into a joke," she said. "You should be ashamed." I said I hadn't done anything wrong. She replied, "You will find out soon enough," and hung up. By Sunday, Daniel was gone most of the day. He said he had errands, but I didn't ask where. That evening, he came home with a brown envelope. He didn't hand it to me, just set it on the kitchen counter. "You might need these," he said. I opened it after he went upstairs. Inside were printed screenshots, my posts, my text with Talia, a copy of the dinner photo where I'd made the cheating joke. There was even a transcript of a conversation between Aaron and Lily that someone must have forwarded. At the top, he'd written in neat handwriting, "Timeline of humiliation." My chest tightened. It wasn't just documentation, it was preparation. When I confronted him the next morning, I asked, "Are you seriously planning to take me to court over a joke?" He said, "I'm not planning, I'm protecting myself." "You're insane," I snapped. "You're ruining our marriage." He looked at me, calm as ever. "You already did that." He left for work without another word. For the rest of the day, I kept pacing the living room, staring at that folder. The word timeline stayed in my head. I told myself he was bluffing, that he'd never actually do anything. But later that night, when I checked my email, I saw a message from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "Notice of consultation, Lowell versus Lowell." I clicked it open, my heart pounding. The message was short, formal, and terrifyingly clear. Daniel Lowell has retained counsel in preparation for a civil filing regarding reputational and emotional damages. I sat there in silence, staring at the screen. For the first time, I realized he wasn't just watching. He was winning. I spent the whole night pacing the living room, trying to convince myself the email was fake. Daniel couldn't possibly mean it. People don't sue their own spouses. It had to be a scare tactic. But by morning, the doubt had started to stick. I couldn't eat, couldn't think. Every noise made me flinch, expecting him to walk in with more papers. When he finally came downstairs, dressed neatly as always, I asked if the email was real. He said yes, just yes. Then he grabbed his coffee, kissed Mia's head, and left for work like it was any other day. I called Talia the moment he was gone. She laughed at first. "He's bluffing," she said. "No man takes his wife to court over a joke. That would make him look pathetic." I wanted to believe her, but there was something about Daniel's calm that didn't feel like bluffing. It felt like someone who'd already decided to act. At school, the tension followed me. The principal called me into his office and asked if I was having personal issues that might affect the school's reputation. I stared at him, stunned. He showed me a printed post from social media, mine with hundreds of comments and shares. My own words, "If your husband can't take a joke, maybe the joke is the marriage." I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "It's humor," I said. "Satire." But his expression stayed flat. "It's gone viral, Ms. Lowell," he said quietly. "You should handle this quickly before it spreads further." That night, I came home furious. Daniel was sitting at the table working on his laptop. I slammed my bag down and said, "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He looked up mildly. "What have I done?" I said, "My job is on the line because of your little legal threats." He said, "No, Era, because of your little public statements." I told him he was being cruel, that he wanted to humiliate me. He said, "I don't need to. You've already done that yourself." His voice was so steady it made me want to scream. I called Talia again, but even she sounded uneasy now. "Maybe just apologize," she said quietly, "before it gets worse." I couldn't believe it. "You're taking his side now?" I asked. She said, "I'm just saying, lawyers don't get involved for fun." The next morning, Aaron showed up at school. I didn't want to talk to him, but he waited by my car. He looked tired. "Era, you need to stop posting," he said. "You're making it worse for everyone." I asked what he meant. He said Daniel had sent him a formal request, something about removing any public references to the situation. "He's documenting everything," Aaron said. "He's not angry anymore. He's building a case." I laughed it off, even though my stomach turned. "A case for what?" "For defamation," Aaron said softly, "and emotional distress. I didn't even know you could file that in a marriage." By that evening, I couldn't pretend anymore. There was another letter waiting on the doorstep, official, stamped, cold. It listed damages, citations, and a demand for retraction of all online statements. It even mentioned specific names: Aaron, Lily, my co-workers. I tore it open, reading the words over and over until they blurred. "Your behavior constitutes public defamation, deliberate emotional humiliation, and reputational harm to spouse and third parties." When Daniel came home, I threw the papers at him. "You're actually serious about this?" I shouted. He didn't raise his voice. "I told you I would protect myself." "You're insane," I said. "You're making a fool of yourself." He said, "I'm making sure no one else can do that again." I wanted to scream, but he just walked past me. I followed him down the hallway, shouting that he was heartless, that I was the victim. He stopped and said quietly, "Victims don't write punchlines." Then he went upstairs. I stayed awake most of the night, refreshing my phone, deleting old posts, blocking people who had shared them. It didn't matter. The screenshots were already out there. Someone had uploaded the dinner clip, just a few seconds where I made the joke and Daniel went still. Thousands of views, comments mocking him, mocking me. The next day, my mother called, her voice shaking. "What is happening, Era? Your face is all over the internet." Daniel looks humiliated. Is it true? I told her it was nothing, that people were twisting the story. She didn't sound convinced. Maybe you should stop talking, she said, before you lose everything. When I hung up, the house was too quiet. Daniel had taken Mia to his mother's again. I stared at the empty living room, the stack of papers on the counter, and the blinking light on my phone. Another message notification from an unknown number. It was short and formal. Court date scheduled. You will receive official notice within 48 hours. I read it 3 times before I sat down. My legs were trembling. I wanted to laugh, but nothing came out. It wasn't a bluff anymore. He wasn't warning me. He was finishing it. And for the first time since this began, I realized I wasn't the one writing the story anymore. He was. The official court papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, in a thick white envelope stamped with the words Lowell versus Lowell. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were pages of formal language I barely understood, phrases like intentional humiliation, defamation of character, and emotional distress supported by evidence. At the end, there were attachments, screenshots of my posts, copies of my emails, even transcribed text messages between Talia and me. I felt my throat tighten. He had everything. When Daniel came home that night, I tried to act calm. I asked why he was doing this, pretending it was about concern. He said, "Because you stopped treating words like they mattered." I told him it was just a joke that went too far, that normal couples forgive and move on. He said, "Normal couples don't build their marriages on humiliation." Then he walked past me, and I realized there was no argument left to win. At school, everyone knew by now. Someone had leaked the filing to a gossip site, and I became the headline. Teacher sued by husband for cheating joke gone too far. My principal called me in again, this time less polite. "Until this is resolved," he said, "it's best if you take unpaid leave." He handed me the form with an awkward expression. "You're talented, Ira," he added, "but perception matters." I left the building with the paper crushed in my hand, tears burning my eyes. In the parking lot, I saw Aaron waiting by his car. He looked pale. "He warned me this would happen," Aaron said quietly. "He said he'd handle it legally so no one got hurt, but this is brutal." I laughed bitterly. "You think I'm not hurt?" He shook his head. "Era, you didn't just hurt him. You destroyed how people see him, and me. I'm sorry, but I can't keep talking to you." Then he got in his car and drove away. That night, I called Talia, desperate for comfort, but she sounded hesitant. "Maybe you should apologize," she said carefully. "Publicly." "I did nothing wrong," I snapped. "He's overreacting." She sighed. "Then why is everyone on his side?" That question hung in the air after she hung up. By Friday, I received another letter, this time from my own lawyer, assigned by the court. He told me to prepare for mediation. He tried to be kind but couldn't hide the disbelief in his tone. "You understand, Mrs. Lowell," he said, "that your words created measurable harm. The documentation is extensive." I said, "It was never serious. It was a joke." He looked at me for a long time, then said softly, "It stopped being a joke when it reached the internet." The mediation was worse than I imagined. Daniel sat across the table, calm as always, in a grey suit that made him look untouchable. I expected him to gloat, to show anger, to look for validation, but he didn't. He just listened while the mediator explained the damages. I felt smaller with every sentence. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to sound confident. "It was satire. I never meant to hurt anyone. This entire thing is exaggerated." Daniel finally looked at me then, his expression unreadable. "It wasn't satire," he said. "It was cruelty. You just didn't like that people stopped laughing." The mediator asked if we wanted to reach a private settlement. Daniel said no. "I want it on record," he said. His voice didn't shake. Not once. When the session ended, He handed his lawyer a folder and stood up. As he walked past me, I said quietly, "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" He stopped. "No, I'm finishing it." Then he left. I sat there for a while, staring at the table. The room felt heavy, like all the air had been drained out. When I finally left, my lawyer told me there would be a formal court date set within 2 weeks. At home, the walls felt thinner, the house colder. His things were mostly gone now. Even Mia's room looked emptier. I went through the motions, made tea, checked my phone, scrolled through old photos. But it all felt pointless. That night, I found one more envelope on the kitchen counter. It was from Daniel's lawyer. Inside was a short note. All communications should now go through legal counsel. Personal contact is no longer necessary. The last line hit harder than the lawsuit itself. I called him anyway. He didn't answer. I texted, "We can fix this, please." The message showed delivered, but there was no reply. Hours later, a final email came through. Subject line, "Updated filing, additional evidence." I opened it without thinking. Inside was a link to a folder containing everything. Screenshots, video clips, my comments, the viral post, even testimonies from colleagues. At the end was a single scanned image of the dinner table that started it all, my face frozen mid-laugh, his expression blank beside me. The caption beneath read, "Exhibit A." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. The laughter that had once made me feel powerful now looked cruel, childish, desperate. For the first time since this began, I stopped defending myself, because there was nothing left to defend. The day of the hearing was bright, almost too bright. I remember thinking it wasn't fair for the sky to look that calm when my life was about to come apart. The courthouse smelled of paper and polish. People moved quietly, their shoes clicking on the floor. Daniel sat across the room, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. He looked composed, almost peaceful. I hated how composed he looked. When the judge entered, I felt my throat close. My lawyer whispered that this was just a preliminary session, that I should stay calm. I nodded, though I could barely breathe. Daniel's lawyer began by reading statements, my posts, my quotes, my own words echoing back at me like small knives. Each one sounded worse out loud. The laughter I'd thought was clever now sounded cruel, hollow. When they read the caption I had written, "If your husband can't take a joke, maybe the joke is the marriage," the judge frowned. "Did you write this, Mrs. Lowell?" she asked. I nodded, my voice caught somewhere between a cough and a whisper. "And you understood that this was public," she said. I tried to explain that it was meant humorously, that it got taken out of context. The judge only replied, "Humor stops being harmless when it targets a person who never agreed to be the punchline." Daniel didn't look at me once. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't attack. He just told the story quietly. The dinner, the silence, the growing ridicule. He said he wasn't seeking revenge, only closure. He said, "I was loyal. I stayed loyal, even when she turned me into a joke." His voice didn't waver. Every word sounded like truth because it was. My lawyer tried to defend me, saying there was no direct financial loss, that it was an emotional misunderstanding. Daniel's lawyer calmly presented documents from my employer, from social media platforms, even from Aaron and Lily. Every name I'd dragged into my drama had become another piece of evidence. When the judge finished reviewing, she leaned back and said, "The damage here is not physical, but reputational, psychological, and self-inflicted. Mrs. Lowell, you didn't just mock your husband, you orchestrated his humiliation." I felt heat rise in my face, but I didn't cry. Not yet. The ruling was short and merciless. The court recognized Daniel's claims of emotional and reputational harm. I was ordered to issue a public apology and pay damages. The judge concluded, "Let this serve as a reminder that cruelty can wear a smile." When the session ended, Daniel stood and thanked the judge politely. He didn't even glance in my direction. I tried to call his name as he passed, but he didn't stop. His lawyer handed my attorney a final envelope. Inside was a copy of the settlement agreement, and on top of it, a handwritten note. You said it was a joke. I just believed you. I left the courthouse in a daze. Outside, a few people I recognized from the neighborhood were whispering. Someone pointed at me. I kept walking until I reached my car, where my phone buzzed non-stop. Messages, tags, comments. News of the case had already leaked. Headlines were short and merciless. Teacher loses case after infidelity joke lawsuit. I turned my phone off. When I got home, the house was nearly empty. His books were gone, his clothes, the framed photos. Even the space where his tools used to hang in the garage was bare. Only a few boxes were left in the corner, labeled personal. I sat on the couch staring at them, wondering when exactly I had crossed the line from clever to cruel. By evening, I opened one of the boxes. Inside were papers, copies of our wedding vows, old photos, movie tickets, birthday cards. On top was the dinner photo again, printed neatly. Behind it was another note. This is where it started. Remember? I folded the paper and put it back, though my hands were shaking. For the first time in weeks, there was no noise, no notifications, no phone calls, no voices defending me. Just silence. I had spent months trying to prove I was in control, and now even my own laughter sounded like evidence. The light outside dimmed. I sat there until the room turned dark, until the outlines of everything blurred. The house felt too big, too quiet, stripped of meaning. I wanted to message him, to explain, to say something clever or cruel or anything at all. But there was nothing left to say. When the wind pushed against the window, I thought I heard something that almost sounded like applause. Soft, distant, final. Maybe that was the real punchline, the one I never saw coming. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.